Hello again, everybody. Here's the month of September. What a great summer we've had. And as you know, AffordableEnergy.ca also offers the gas price prediction, which is gaswizard.ca, so that more ways to find to save you a bit of money. And it's been a great year. Prices are down about 20 cents a liter compared to this time last year. And that really is an important topic that we've talked, we've broached in the past, because the lower energy prices, despite the federal government imposing carbon taxes that amount to 20, 30 cents a liter, that's the first one, that's 20 cents, that's the first carbon tax. The second one is the clean fuel standard, already 6, 8 cents a liter in the Maritimes and Quebec, eventually hitting Ontario and Western Canada later this year. We are looking at a scenario where even with the Canadian dollar trading at 135 pennies to buy US dollar, it's adding 21 cents a liter. We are still seeing a decrease in prices. Now, some are saying it's shenanigans from some of the hedge funds, think of Goldman Sachs here, that have already said, hey, they want to support the Democrats in the United States. Whatever the reason for doing it, it's been a big boon and benefit for consumers, but it's probably bad news for our grifting liberal NDP Green friends in Ottawa. And that's because lower gas prices makes internal combustion engines that much more attractive. So despite the federal government going out and imposing EV mandates on people for vehicles they don't want and can't afford, the federal government has to now combat the idea that energy prices may be low for the next few months, and that is going to incentivize people not to buy, heavily subsidized, irrelevant, impractical electric vehicles. And no mistake here. I'm not, dumping on people because they happen to like EVs. There's a market for them, and there's a constituency of people out there who think they're the best thing since sliced bread, even though they were the best thing since sliced bread 100 years ago, and we abandoned them for good reason. The reality is that none of these things are proving out to work in favor of the federal government. And you'll recall about at the beginning of summer, maybe at the end of springtime, I did a piece with all of you here when I went to the Oakville Ford plant. And I was passionate about that because I thought it was a dumb idea to shut down a perfectly good plant that had never shut down since it was built in 1953. In fact, even my father-in-law, full disclosure, worked there for a good number of years. And for that reason, I thought it was a little unusual to have a plant that was idle and that was waiting for either more money from the government or a decision by the Ford Motor Corporation itself. Well, that decision came just a few weeks later when Ford came out at the end of June and said, hey, you know what? We're losing, as I mentioned then, $100,000 per unit selling these things. We're not interested in losing money. We're a company that has rarely gone to the federal government looking for a handout, as the other grifting companies, Stellantis and GM, have done, and have now tried to prove their EV environmental creds by taking advantage of your money and mine through subsidies in order to build electric vehicles that you and I don't want and shouldn't have force upon ourselves. So Ford has now decided, hey, not only did we get rid of 2,700 good workers, we're going to rehire about that number, and we're going to start building something that people actually do want in North America. And what is that? The F-Series 250 Super Duty. Gasoline and diesel. They come in both versions. Some of you will know on Twitter, Gas Price Wizard, that I have often, my very best friend has a 1968 Ford 250 still on the road. And, when you think about it, that vehicle is approaching 60 years of duty and still helping my friend do what he does day in, day out. It tells you something about the longevity of these vehicles and how well they're built. And that the vehicles that are being planned by Ford at that particular plant will continue to be what the consumer wants in the years to come. Now, we have a problem. You have a federal government supported by the NDP, whether they like it or not, and they say they've ripped up the agreement, baloney. And a couple of Bloc and Green members of Parliament who think it's okay to impose on you that if you want a new vehicle, it better be an EV. Doesn't matter that the battery on these things isn't that great. Doesn't matter that the technology on these things is not advanced. There might be a lot of fun if you're someone who likes the latest techno stuff, but it doesn't work very well in minus 20-degree weather in Ontario, or worse in Alberta, Saskatchewan, or northern Quebec, and you're nowhere near getting your vehicle plugged in. We've also talked about the amount of time it takes, even with the best, most advanced level 3 2 chargers, which cost a lot of money, subsidized by you, by the way. 30, 40 minutes to get a full charge when I can do it in 4 minutes with a gasoline vehicle. Look, as much as there are people out there who believe that this is wonderful and that this is the way we have to go ahead, I think the jury is now come back in. It was sequestered for a while, but I think most people are saying absolutely not. EV sales have dropped in Canada from 13% down to 11%, and they're going to continue to drop. So, saying that 60% of us have to buy EVs by 2030 isn't just totalitarianism, which reminds us of the command system we saw under certain regimes in the Soviet Union 70, 80, 90 years ago. It reminds us that this government is committed to doing something you don't want to do, and you have to pay for whether you like it or not. Is it any wonder that we're seeing in this country, the diminution of our, productivity, labor productivity? It's startling that we don't have the incentive to build the things that the world wants, and yet we have exactly what the world wants with more energy, our oil, our gas, and yes, sometimes even our propane. All of these things are in high demand, and don't take my word for it. Some of our greatest partners that I worked with when I was in foreign affairs for representing you abroad have come to us and said, whether it's Greece, whether it's Poland, whether it's Germany, whether it's South Korea, many of these countries have said, look, we want Canadian gas and we want Canadian oil. We don't want to buy it from Russia. We don't want to buy it from Venezuela. We don't want to buy it, unlike the United States, which seems to be okay with killing a pipeline, Keystone XL pipeline. Thank you, Joe Biden. A nice slap in the face to every Canadian. And they don't want to buy it from places like Iran. So at the time in which Canada is very much in a position to help the world with what it needs the most, it's not willing to step up to the plate. And that's not because Canadians don't believe that. There are thousands, if not millions, of hardworking Canadians who know how important it is not just to sell those products to the rest of the world, but who also understand that the fundamental revenues that the government creates or has in terms of the revenues from this help support the kind of social programs that we have in this country. And so, for that reason, I think it's really important for us to take into consideration that electric vehicles was a bad idea. Subsidizing to try to change the automotive industry to compete with the Americans is going to wind up being a disaster. And every single day we have an announcement from yet another vehicle manufacturer, battery maker, bus maker, anybody who's involved with that technology saying, we just can't make a go of it. It's time for a new government to get real, and those who are not to leave the direction, the future, and policy making of this country in the hands of people who are pragmatic and who are realistic.